All right, great. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to all of our attendees. This is a Pipefi Demo Day webinar. We'll be talking about how customer support is more than tickets, how automating processes improves the overall customer experience. So we have a lot to talk about with regard to customer support, customer success, customer experience, and the customer service organization in general today. I am your facilitator, so just a couple of housekeeping items. We are recording this and we will be sending out the recording. We are going to ask a couple of questions within the presentation, and then we also will have time for a Q&A at the end. And with that, I will hand it over to Nick, who is going to be driving the presentation and demonstration today.
Yeah, thanks for handing it off, and happy Thursday, everybody. So to give everybody a little bit of background on who am I, my name's Nick Sowers. I work on the customer-facing side of the organization here at Pipefi. A little bit of background on myself. I've helped two customer-facing orgs kind of build out their strategy from account management, customer experience perspective. So hopefully try to give the people who are on the webinar here today a little bit of background into providing great service to our customers and adding some differentiation not only to your product, but with how you typically handle customer support, right? So for us at Pipefi, we kind of like to think of three major challenges for customer support, and you'll kind of see three of those right here. So number one, poor customer satisfaction leads to churn. Right now, within any SaaS-based business right now, one of the hottest topics is how do we prevent churn, right? Like it's hard enough to get a customer in the door, and the money we lose that we bring in ultimately kind of hurts the most because we've invested a lot of time and energy into bringing that customer to our company, trying to onboard them successfully using account management, using customer success, and obviously handling some of those technical questions or bugs that may pop up through our support channels. And for us, we think slow responses and case resolution velocity are typically things that can help you make the experience using your product better. And we're trying to help teams kind of enhance their own SLAs and ultimately make customers feel good about the experience they're having and using the product. And some of the things that'll happen within a customer support organization is they'll have inefficient processes that lead to longer response times, and ultimately that can kind of lead to high service costs because your team is starting to look at a bunch of different tools to make that process better. And buying more tools isn't always the solution. A lot of times if a team is jumping between multiple systems, and what I mean by multiple systems is potentially a shared inbox, potentially a ticketing system that the development team might be using, to maybe even logging notes inside of a CRM or a CS-oriented tool that maybe tracks usage on the back end of the platform to kind of get a feel for truly what is the customer experience on the day-to-day. So for us at Pipefi, we're trying to understand how can we try and integrate a lot of those systems together to reduce some of the data entry that happens back and forth between those tools, and kind of for the leaders, give a little bit more insight into where a particular customer or a particular ticket is at that may be causing a lot of problems and maybe just bogging the team down, right? So there isn't a whole lot of metrics that kind of go across all of these different tools, because every tool kind of tracks their own metrics differently, but that doesn't necessarily connect together this longer tail process that can manifest itself, right? So I'm going to move on to my next slide here. I think we may have some questions get posted. So please feel free to post those questions and we'll hopefully get you an answer as soon as we can. We want this to be as interactive as possible. So I'd mentioned a little bit about how that long tail process can manifest itself when talking about CS and CX because of the volume of tools that are using. And this slide right here kind of illustrates some of how that can happen, right? So over on the left-hand side, you'll see the complexity, right? Like how much automation typically needs to happen and how much integration can potentially happen within your kind of core systems as a business, right? So for any customer-facing organization, a lot of times that's going to be our CRM. That's our ultimate system of truth. It includes our customers. It includes our contacts within our customer base. It includes the contracts, it includes the renewals, and hopefully it includes a lot more information around usage, adoption, and potentially if it needs to be flagged as a potential churn risk, right? And a lot of times within those CRM systems, there are gaps that exist, right? Because the CRM is typically built for a sales organization, right? So from a success side of things, it doesn't always have or pull in the information that we need to see to truly understand, like, is a customer healthy? Are they happy? What tickets have they potentially submitted to the organization? What frustrations are they potentially having right now? And a lot of times that's where an organization will bring in a vertical application to enhance that CRM experience, right? So a couple of vertical applications I can think of off the top of my head, maybe something like a game site, maybe something like a 6sense, maybe something like a Help Scout to potentially do some sort of shared inbox style things. And any of the gaps that kind of exist between those tools or between the integrations between those tools typically will end up in the dreaded Slack communications, Teams communications, maybe back into an individual rep's inbox or shared inbox, or might be tracked on the dreaded spreadsheet, right? And ultimately what that does is it creates a lack of visibility for the people who are trying to track those tickets. So your individual customer support teams. It may also create a lack of visibility for the management team into kind of understanding, like, if we've had a ticket that's been existing for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, maybe even 3 months, we've escalated it to the development team. Like, what's really the story here? Like, where did it start from? How long has it been sitting in our, potentially our Jira queue or our Zendesk queue? And what can we kind of do to kind of understand what's happening there? And leadership also wants to know about this, because a lot of times those tickets that are outstanding and that are kind of bothering the customers the most are usually the things that ultimately lead to things like churn, right? And that's usually going to get on the radar of management. So we want to start to think about how can we automate some of this across, maybe one tool like a Pipefi that can kind of have its hand in each of the buckets here and allow a customer support team or a customer support management team to ultimately have a better understanding for where a particular ticket is as it's bouncing through the multiple systems that we have, right? So at Pipefi, when we talk about building kind of a digital first customer support strategy, we kind of like to think of it as in 4 pillars, excuse me. So number one is being able to provide self-service options for customers. And what we mean by self-service options could be live chat within the system, within the platform that we're using. It could be having a very desirable help center, or being able to talk to a chat that directs you to some important links within your help center to kind of give people the information that they need when they need it, right? And a lot of times those are going to be our best customers, the customers who are kind of self-servicing themselves, right? To ultimately find the information that they want to do. Because if they're using a system like Pipefi or like your own tool, chances are they like to do things on their own, right? The other thing we want to be able to do is provide one view and one technology for your agents, right? So if you're bouncing between multiple tools, a lot of times that can be frustrating for customer support teams or for customer experience teams, because they're having to enter the same information into multiple places. And nobody likes to do data entry. Those are things that we should be able to automate inside the platform. The third thing we want to have is we want to be collaborative across the entire organization. And this is incredibly important for customer support, because you think about the things that ultimately get escalated within the customer support organization are typically going to be when, a customer flags a problem that's happening inside of the software. Nobody ever likes to call something a bug, but the reality of things is they do happen. So for a lot of support organizations, right, like you may pick up a ticket inside of your shared inbox, right? Maybe you're using something like Help Scout. That ticket may ultimately lead to a ticket getting created inside of the development tool that's being used, maybe something like Jira, right? Like, we want our teams to be able to seamlessly push information from the communication from their customer to our development team. So how are we doing that without necessarily bogging down our customer support organization to create that new ticket and copy and paste all the information or draw it up based on a conversation that they had with a customer? And the fourth is kind of using high-level analytics to kind of drive future growth and ultimately kind of understand like how much more bandwidth can we give our team, right? Because obviously a lot of organizations are investing a lot into customer support. They're investing a lot into customer experience, but they kind of want to understand like what's the bandwidth of our team and how can we make our team more efficient, right? And a lot of times you'll want to see how quickly are we answering tickets. If you're bringing in a tool that's automating a lot of the back and forth between tools, how much more time is that giving us on a rep to rep basis? That's all very important. And then ultimately, how much time are we giving back to our customers, which is ultimately the most important thing, right? So how we think about doing this at Pipefi, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Pipefi here as opposed to customer support, is trying to help your IT team bridge the gap to your team, right? And our philosophy is building a platform that's based around no code and citizen development. And those are two very buzzy words right now. And what they essentially mean is somebody who is a non-technical user, right? Somebody who doesn't necessarily know how to code. A lot of customer support people right now are dangerous with code, right? And what I mean by dangerous is they know enough to give customers some information on being able to clear caches, look at the platform and understand like, okay, where is something maybe breaking? And so they're dangerous with code, but they're not necessarily going to be coding applications themselves. And that's where Pipefi comes in. So before tools like Pipefi, IT resources can be strained. And a lot of the things that our support org wishes they could build or wishes they could bring in, a lot of times get put on the back burner because the projects that the IT team has, they just haven't prioritized support yet. And that can happen for a lot of organizations inside of a company. It's not always customer support. Sometimes it's HR, sometimes it's marketing, etc. And so after bringing in a tool like Pipefi, we want to be able to allow the business process owner, so the customer support management team, the customer support leads, to be able to make business changes at a business pace and feel empowered by IT to own that process and make it better, right? Like ultimately we want to feel empowered with what we're trying to drive for our organization and for our customers. And Pipefi is trying to empower your team to own that process and make tangible changes at the pace we know we need to go. So this slide right here kind of illustrates how Pipefi works. And that's based off of kind of three key things in my mind. So number one, it's going to be inputs. So what triggers work for our team? And if you think about that from a support perspective, it could be an email coming into our shared inbox. It could be a chat coming in from our website. It could be somebody dialing into our corporate line, right? Like there are multiple places where customers are going to be able to come in, and we need a good way to be able to enter or pick up that information as quickly as possible and put it into some sort of resolution flow, right? So within Pipefi, we're allowing teams to kind of have that Kanban style view to push things through an approval, to get things done and potentially escalate things into other places if it really is a major issue that's blocking the customer from success, right? And when those things happen, let's say it hits that stage of being flagged as a bug or being flagged as something being broken, that may hit a certain stage within Pipefi, and that might automatically kick out a ticket to potentially something like Jira, to something like Zendesk. So that development team, that engineering team can pick up that information and all of the relevant information would get pulled automatically. They can update that ticket and the team can see the information because it could potentially be a two-way sync. And we're essentially just allowing teams to kind of continue moving forward as opposed to kind of getting that back and forth that can happen, whether it's over messaging, whether it's over email, or whether it potentially is over a conversation that we can't necessarily track, right? So Pipefi is trying to get that input of work, what kicks it off, manage the middle, and ultimately allow for some output, which is hopefully a happy customer, right? We've solved your issue. Here's how quickly we did it. Do you have anything else, etc. And when you're doing that well and you're using something like Pipefi to see the overarching process, you're able to kind of have real-time dashboards. Your change management's going to be a little bit better. And you're going to be able to have better metrics and KPIs across all of your systems from a support perspective, because we're not necessarily parsing through 3 or 4 or 5 different systems to kind of understand what are the metrics from each and what does that mean for the broader organization. And in terms of how we do this, Pipefi does have 500 integrations out of the box. So if you're using, something like Jira, something like Zendesk, something like Help Scout, a lot of times we're able to integrate into those tools if they're doing a particular function within your CS org, or in some cases, we can do a little bit of everything, right? So your team can kind of come in and design a workflow using some of the functionality we're about to get into within Pipefi to ultimately make your customer experience better, right? And as far as the companies we work with, we have over 3,000 different companies leveraging Pipefi in 150 countries. Use cases up and down the board, but I would say one of our most popular is going to be managing things from a ticketing perspective within the customer support org, and basically being able to take that ticket or that information and do something else with it, right? Because this isn't always about just doing tickets, and I'll get into what that means in a second here. But before I do dive into the Pipefi platform, do we have any questions? Do we have any information here that we'd like to kind of ask before I jump into Pipefi itself?
Hey, Nick, no questions, but do you want to ask the questions for the chat, or do you want to leave those to later?
Let's leave those to later.
Okay.
All right, so hopefully everybody can still see my screen. I'm going to jump over to Pipefi, and this is our customer service demo environment. And so for me, I know we talked a little bit about tickets. This isn't just about tickets, right? Like a customer support org may need to think about multiple different things, right? So maybe we want to have some sort of churn management queue. Maybe, so the customer experience org is doing a little bit with contract renewals. Obviously, if we're pushing things into the IT service desk, we want to have some information with things that are happening there. And more or less, each one of these, we call them pipes, are basically a process that's managed, right? So if I'm going into customer onboarding, right, like an integral part of a customer experience, customer support organization, what are the jobs that we have running right here? And this is basically a group of customers in particular stages. And if I'm having some sort of email communication, right, like Pipefi does have the ability to have some sort of shared inbox, right? So if I'm looking at a shared inbox, I can actually click on this here. I can see what may have been said in this email. You can see this text not necessarily built out, but I can also see what card or case this is for, what phase it's in. And if I actually need to get into that card, I can open it up here and I can see all of the relevant information for this particular job, right? Now, this is an onboarding job. It's not necessarily a true ticket, but you'll see here that this process is basically built out from start to finish here. So every step of the way, we are capturing the information here. So what's the initial kickoff? This might be something that's pulled in automatically from something like Salesforce or something like HubSpot. And then as it's going through, new onboarding, right? Like who's responsible for that onboarding? What's our customer segmentation? Adding things like who might be the champion or who are the stakeholders that are involved here, right? Like we're making sure that we can track each step of the way to ultimately get a customer into the process of being onboarded successfully, and hopefully thinking about now going back to contract renewals, making sure that we keep that revenue that just came in, right? And that ultimately means we have a happy customer, right? So each one of these stages is customizable. If I wanted to add a card, I could click it here, or I could kick things off using a start form like this. And if I wanted to create some sort of place where customers could go, again, we do have the ability to create some sort of shared inbox, right? And you'll see the shared inbox. We can redirect this here. And if I wanted to enable it, I can. And you'll see this is where you can learn how to connect and create your group email address. You can copy and paste this, turn it on. You can also create email templates. So if we want to have automatic responses that go out, we can do that from here. We can also create email automation email automation rules. So when something hits a particular stage, or maybe it's been overdue for 48 hours and we want to escalate that, you can create some sort of automation loop that allows you to make sure that even if our reps can't get to this in time, our customers understand that we might be working on it. And if we want to see some of the automation rules that might need to get built out, our team has the ability to create those logic rules inside of Pipefi, again, from a no code interface, right? So when a field is updated, we may want to trigger something. You can see here, let's maybe do our IT service desk. Maybe when our assignee choose an action, we want to potentially move this somewhere. You want to move this from screening to solving because assignee was added. I'm able to create that automation rule, which is great. If we need to create portals, right? Like we do also have the ability to create a customer service portal here. I'm going to click on this and it's going to take me to what that portal might look like. This one's fairly rudimentary, but if I wanted to edit this, it is very easy to come in here, add background, customer logo, change some of the content here, add text. Again, doing this from a no code environment. So this process that you're building, this customer facing process that you're building can be done simply, can be done quickly, and can be changed on the fly based on how we're going to be handling things. And more or less, that's kind of Pipefi's core pieces, right? So we've got portals, we've got our pipes, and then ultimately, if we want to create reports and dashboards, we do also have the ability to generate reports based on particular pipes. And if I go into a particular pipe, I may also want to have some sort of dashboard, right? So I can go into Pipefi and potentially create a dashboard that kind of gives me some high level overview for what particularly might be happening inside of my particular board, right? So how are my jobs in progress looking? What are their status, customer segmentation, lead time, etc. And I know we're getting close on time here. We have about 6 minutes left. So I do want to stop the screen share here and open things up for questions and polls, and also give people a notification that if you were referred in here from somebody who kind of pushed you from the community, we are going to be following up with our gifts to those referees.
Great. If we don't have any questions, I'm going to go ahead and ask if people are comfortable, a couple of questions for folks just to respond to in the chat. And one of them is how many tools your customer success or support team uses on their day-to-day today, if you're comfortable sharing. And then for Nick, I guess one of the things I'll just kind of just getting into sort of some deeper benefit analysis of automation. I think you mentioned a lot of these, but can you reiterate some process challenges with customer support that you've encountered in your customers' organizations, and then what benefit they achieved by automating their processes potentially with Pipefi?
Yeah, I would say the biggest one that stands out for me is the communication gap that can occasionally exist between support and the engineering group, right? In a lot of cases, organizations will have different tools for customer support than they do for their engineering team, right? Their engineering team probably lives in something like Jira, right? Something that's kind of managing their sprints or their development cycles. And sometimes customer support has access to those. Sometimes they don't. But what a lot of times will happen is customer support org will pick up a ticket inside of their tool, and then they basically have to copy all of that information over and put it into the development or engineering team's tool. And for us, I would say the easiest win is just being able to automate the pushing and pulling of information from those two systems into one place. Cuts down on the amount of double work that customer support teams are doing. Nobody likes double work. And in a lot of cases, when that ticket gets picked up inside of engineering, it can update something like Pipefi which can then update the customer automatically, right? So you're leveraging a little bit of automation to make those simple communication things happen without necessarily having to kind of take your time to see what's happening inside of Jira or ping that engineer that picked it up, right? Like it's all just kind of happening in real time, which is very powerful.
Great. I love that. All right, great. Well, for our attendees, I'm going to go ahead and start a quick poll. It's essentially about getting follow-up information. So let me start that. And you'll just see a quick question pop up on your screen. And I'll just give you guys just a couple of seconds to answer. And then I think in the near term, I don't see we have any questions. Nick, is there anything else you would want to add for the audience?
No, just appreciate people stopping by here, and hopefully you learned something from me today.
I'm sure everybody did. All right, great. Well, thanks everyone for your time. We appreciate it. And Nick, great job. Thanks so much. And we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.